All right, Colts Nation. Happy Thursday morning to you. Thursday, such a beautiful day, is it not? Why do I say that? Well, number one, Thursday is Friday's Friday, right? So if Friday is the best day of the week, because if you're a middle-class pleb like me, you work 9 to 5 Monday to Friday, right? It marks the end. Thursday is the precursor to the precursor of the weekend. And it also marks us from being a day away, from being a day away, from being a day away from Football Sunday. At least I think that's how the math works out. And no, we're not previewing the Titans game just yet. We'll get there. That'll be the next episode. In the meantime, there's some other things I would like to talk about. Right off the bat, we got to go through the practice updates. As I record this, only one practice has been completed, right? The practice week starts on Wednesday, and then, of course, you get Thursday and Friday as well. The good news out of that practice are the following. One, Charvarius Ward, who missed Sunday's game against the Denver Broncos with a concussion, a full go in practice. He is still in the concussion protocol, but that's a good thing for him to be going at full capacity in practice. And then Latu limited with that hamstring injury that held him out of that Broncos game. Both of those guys practicing on Wednesday does bode well for their availability this week. On the downside, though, you do have Josh Downs, who missed practice with an ankle injury, and Tyler Warren, who missed practice with a toe injury. And we'll see how those things progress. Ultimately, nothing to get too worked up about just yet. Really doesn't matter much at this point, right? Like, that's the first practice of the week. The game was on Sunday. These guys are a little banged up, and they're trying to make sure they're healthy for Sunday. If we're having a similar conversation on Friday and these guys aren't practicing, of course, that'll be much different. But as of right now, take a deep breath. Everything totally fine. So those are your practice updates. Now, let's talk about what it is that we'll be covering today. Number one, I want to talk about this idea of sustainability for the Indianapolis Colts. Is the level of success that this team is having up to this point something that they can sustain? Because there's no two ways about it. The Indianapolis Colts right now are getting it done at a very, very high level. And I think we all see that. We're all excited about that, and it feels different to us. But I think when I rattle off some of the numbers as to just how good they're getting it done relative to the rest of the league, you're going to be, I think, stunned to some degree. And then two, kind of to stay on the positive side of things, I also think right now the Colts have potentially 5 awards they can collectively win this year, both as a team and in terms of players individually. We'll talk about what those awards are and why I think the Colts guys can win them. Then we'll switch over to some of the less positive stuff, one of which being the defensive line. Their performances up to this point, albeit only 2 games, I think less than desirable. We're going to talk a little bit about that. And then we're also going to talk about my ideas for how to potentially fix it. And then we will talk about Zaire Franklin, who once again was on the 520 in the morning with Jeff Teague and the boys. He made a couple comments that raised some eyebrows, one of which was in regard to Justin Herbert. That, of course, was during the show. And the other which was about Cam Ward. And that's what we'll talk about today. Does that sound like an episode to you? To me, it sure does. So let's get into it. But before we do, you know what it is? I got to introduce the show. My name is Justin. This right here is the Riding the Bench Colts podcast. As always, ask anyone watching and enjoying the show, go ahead, shoot it a like. It's going to help me get out to as many Colts fans as humanly possible. Of course, subscribe. If you want to be a part of the journey, we're on our way to 4,000 subscribers over here on the YouTube channel. We're getting there. We're most certainly going to be there this season. But if you keep coming back, enjoying the show, perhaps it's your first day here and you're liking what you're hearing so far, hit that subscribe button. Never miss an episode again. Audio listeners, leave a 5-star review. Let the people know how much you're enjoying the show. I always ask you guys to do these things because as much as I talk into the microphone, ultimately, the show is really nothing without you guys. You guys are the most important thing. So share it with a friend, share it on Reddit, wherever it is that let someone know about it. If you're a Colts fan and you know another Colts fan that you think is going to enjoy it, you guys are the most important thing to this show's success, and we're trying to build something big here. Of course, as I always say, if you're on YouTube, be civil in the comments section, right? You don't know what the person on the other end of the keyboard is going through today. So if you disagree, totally fine, but take it as an opportunity to have a discussion, right? We're all on the same team here. We're rooting for the Indianapolis Colts. It's for the shoe. We bleed blue. That is what it is. We're all friends around here. It's a kumbaya, particularly as the Colts are, as of right now, undefeated. So with all of that out of the way, let's go back to the regularly scheduled programming and let's touch on the Colts' success up to this point. Because as of right now, this is a team that is number 1 in the NFL in point differential with plus 26. They lead the league in forced turnovers while also not having committed one on the offensive side of the ball yet. They're top 5 in yards allowed on the defensive side of the ball. They're top 2 in total yards on offense. They're tied for second in passing offense. They're tied for third as a rushing offense, and they're fourth in points per game right now. Now, listen, this, of course, is all only through 2 games for this team, right? But it is kind of hard to ignore the fact that the Colts are absolutely getting it done as a team right now. You're talking complementary football, capitalizing on the other team's mistakes on both sides of the ball. But I do think at the moment, you kind of have 2 types of Colts fans, and reasonably so. Like, there's nothing wrong with the fact that we're kind of split in this regard. One, you have people who are all on board, right? All in on the team, ready after 2 games to anoint this team as a real contender, or at least someone who's going to be able to make some noise, get into the playoffs, and the whole deal. And that, based off of what we've seen, is a very reasonable conclusion to come to. But at the same time, you do have people on the other side of the spectrum, right? You have some of us who are a bit hesitant to get excited because, quite frankly, in recent years with this Colts team, we have suffered. We've suffered, right? Some of the things that we have seen this team do or not do have kind of left us scarred, right? And that is just as reasonable as being positive about this team right now. So the question really does become, is this sustainable, or more so, are they for real, right? Because do I think that the Colts are going to remain like a top 2 team in the league for the entirety of the season? Probably not. But are they a legitimate force to be reckoned with? Why should we buy in? Well, here's my 2 cents on why you should. And we spoke about this once before, but it's a point that I feel is important to bring home. One of the things I feel about this Indianapolis Colts team that makes them so different right now is the fact that you have a lot of guys at points in their careers that are kind of at similar points in their careers, right? You have a lot of guys on this roster and in this organization that have a lot on the line. You think about the coach in Shane Steichen and Chris Ballard. We obviously know both of them are doing it for their jobs this year, right? You have a guy in Daniel Jones who ultimately is kind of on his last chance to be a starting quarterback in this league. He's on that Sam Darnold with the Vikings. He's on that Geno Smith with the Seahawks, that Baker with the Buccaneers, the whole bit, right? And then you have guys on the roster who are kind of in their prime or the back end of their prime. The DeForest Buckners, the Grover Stewarts, the Jonathan Taylors, the Zaire Franklins, the Quentin Nelsons, right? The Braden Smiths even. The list goes on and on. But you have a lot of guys at the moment who, to some degree, it's kind of now or never, right? And it's kind of all hands on deck. And then, of course, obviously, you have the daughters owning the team in the wake of Jim Irsay's passing and how much it clearly means to them. Carly Irsay, the queen of Indianapolis, over there on the sidelines. And some people call that micromanaging. I don't think so. I mean, I think when she says, hey, I encourage other owners to do this. If you're going to be paying these people millions and millions and millions of dollars, you should have an idea of what's going on. I think a lot of owners can learn from Carly Irsay Gordon, but that's neither here nor there. All of those things, all of these people that are all on one mission right now, which is now or never, that's the theme of the Colts this year. It's that reason and that reason alone that I think you should buy into what it is that they're doing, okay? That's right off the bat. Now, let's talk about some of those awards that this team may win this year. Now, we're not there yet, but I'm talking about things that are in play for the Indianapolis Colts. Number 1, Daniel Jones, comeback player of the year. I've seen a lot of people saying that is a award that is reserved only for people that are injured. That is not at all what that award is for, and we saw it as recently as Joe Flacco winning it with the Browns. The criteria, let me read this off for you, for the comeback player of the year in the NFL is to emphasize players overcoming illness, physical injury, or, and this is the kicker, or other circumstances that caused them to miss playing time the previous season. The award's intent is to honor resilience against adversity rather than rewarding a player for a resurgent or improved performance after a poor season. But you look at that and saying other circumstances that caused them to miss playing time the previous season, honor resilience against adversity. If that does not perfectly describe Daniel Jones and kind of how he's bounced back to start this season after getting cut midseason by the Giants, and if you want to get sad, go watch his press conference when he was about to get cut by the Giants. I mean, it was heartbreaking. And then to go from that and all the adversity he's gone through, right? Even the adversity from the Colts fan base this offseason, kind of what the perception was versus what it is that we've seen. A guy in Daniel Jones right now playing like this, if he continues to do it and the Colts make the playoffs, that right there, in my opinion, you have the shoe and comeback player of the year in Daniel Jones if this keeps up. So that's one of them. Number two, how about Jonathan Taylor winning Offensive Player of the Year? If he could continue doing what he's doing right now, because obviously we all know what he brings as a runner. He's always brought that, right? When you talk about a guy simply that you can hand the football off to and watch him go, Jonathan Taylor has always done that. But what we've seen this year through 2 games is an evolution as an every down back, as a receiver, as a pass blocker. This is news to us, right? One of the things coming into this season that I thought the Colts needed was a guy who can take on that role for this team that can be trusted. The only person we really had was Tyler Goodson to do that, right? And DJ Giddens was drafted, and there was some speculation as to whether or not he was going to do it. But ultimately, it looks like Jonathan Taylor has it covered and covered in a big way. And obviously, in doing that, he has more opportunities to be on the field and touch the ball and ultimately prove that he is the offensive player of the year. You know, all this talk about guys on this offense, guys like the offensive linemen, guys like Tyler Warren, guys like Josh Downs, Michael Pittman, Alec Pierce, all of this stuff, right? At the end of the day, you do kind of look at Jonathan Taylor, and he is still the glue that holds this offense together to some degree. I guess you could argue that you could plug in another running back and they can do well. But make no mistake, what Jonathan Taylor just did against the Denver Broncos was a very, very special performance. And I think he's going to have a number of performances that are at that level or a similar level this year. And I think if he does that and the Colts are still a high-scoring offense and the rushing offense continues to be amongst the top of the league, I think it becomes a primary candidate for Offensive Player of the Year. Next up, Tyler Warren for Offensive Rookie of the Year. This one may be a little bit of a stretch, primarily because I don't know how much they weigh this type of thing, one towards quarterback and two towards the stats, right? But I do think, again, this is all predicated on the Colts offense being good, everything I've listed so far, right? I do think he clearly is the best rookie tight end right off the bat. And I think if you're looking at this, and I'm not sure if they will, as an overall impact on the offense outside of the stats, what Tyler Warren has brought to this offense from a stability standpoint at the tight end position as kind of a cog in this offense who week to week is going to be involved. Like you have the wide receivers who on a matchup basis, ultimately it kind of depends, right? Like week 1, you were looking at Michael Pittman Jr. Last week, you were looking at more of a Josh Downs and even an Alec Pierce. But Tyler Warren is a guy at tight end who's a little bit of a fixture, and they can line him up all over the place. So if you want to talk about pure impact on the offensive side of the ball, really you can look at Tyler Warren and say there's not a single rookie on the offensive side of the ball that means more to what it is that their team is doing on offense than him. And that's, of course, if you're not weighing it completely towards the quarterback position, right? And you look at the Titans, I don't anticipate that they're going to be any good. I do like the way Cam Ward is playing, though, overall, even if the stats don't show it. Next award the Colts can win, an obvious one. I know people don't think about it as an award. How about the AFC South title? I mean, why not? You look at the Titans, as we just said, they're not going to do it. There ain't no chance. Their coach, did you see that clip? You have a coach that did not realize. I mean, I am an idiot who sits on his couch and watches the game while he eats Chinese food. Their coach did not know that you did not need 2 feet down, that if you got like a foot down and an elbow down, that counted as a catch. That is almost hard to even fathom, right? But the Titans, either way, no matter how you look at it, they're not going to get it done this year for the division. The Texans, who are kind of the primary team other than the Colts that you would look at, they don't look too hot right now. And I think really the only thing that team has going for them right now is the fact that C.J. Stroud is their quarterback and that they have a phenomenal pass rush, at least on paper, right? But overall, that's not a complete football team. The offensive line continues to struggle. The Texans have continued to not build up that side of the ball. And I said this offseason, and I maintain, when you talk about the Indianapolis Colts as a roster, all this talk about Chris Ballard not being able to build one, you look across this division, the Colts are far and away, top to bottom, the best roster in terms of being a complete roster. I'm not saying they have the most top-end talent, but they're the best roster in the AFC South, no questions asked. And then, of course, you have the Jaguars, that sorry organization with that disgusting fan base, who was 2 years removed from thinking they were starting a dynasty, by the way. that team ain't going to get it done either. Trevor Lawrence is not it at the quarterback position. He's a guy right now who has not gotten any better at quarterback, in my personal opinion, since his rookie year. Maybe a little bit better, but overall, he's still a guy who is not playing winning football. I'm not sure if I've ever seen him throw a check down in my entire life. And I think what we're watching here, I'm not sure if you watched this game last week, but it was like kind of not alarming. For me, it was obviously great. But I think you're watching the beginning of the end of Trevor Lawrence in Jacksonville right now. It's either going to be him or the coach. It depends who Shad Khan ultimately sides with. But as of right now, I don't think Liam Cohen's going to put up with Trevor Lawrence. I really don't. And if they believe in the coach, I think a guy in Trevor Lawrence is someone that it might not be on the Jaguars all that much longer. And then, of course, all of those things coming together would result in the Colts being the winners of the AFC South for the first time since the year 2014, back when he who shall not be named was leading this offense. If all of those things happen, or if any of those things happen, or quite frankly, they just win the division and the offense plays as good as it's playing, it'll all be due to a guy in Shane Steichen who will be the shoo-in favorite for Coach of the Year. Think about it. Coming into this year, he led the NFL in terms of odds when you were talking about coaches to get fired first. I think Shane Steichen was either number 1 or number 2 on that list. Like, the Colts had a lot working against them from a public perception standpoint coming into this year, even from the fan base, right? And to go from that to potentially what it is that this looks like right now, you would have to assume that Shane Steichen would win the Coach of the Year, no questions asked. I believe if they had made the playoffs in 2023, actually, with Gardner Minshew, which of course they did not. We know they lost to the Texans. I think he probably would have been second in voting that year to Kevin O'Connell, who ultimately was going to win it anyway. But Shane Steichen here really doing something real special so far to start this season in terms of the way this team is playing. So those are 5 awards right there that the Colts can win this year. And I don't think any of them are particularly far-fetched at all, right? Of course, I'm being the optimist. Of course, I'm celebrating the team to some degree in doing that. But I'm kind of bringing to you something that's very, very real. So now that we've gotten through all of the positivity, let's get into the negativity a little bit. And I want to start with the defensive line because really, against the Broncos, man, I understand Laitu Latu was out, but they did not show much of anything. That's a game where I can't think of, just to my eye, a single disruptive play that defensive line made the entire game. Of course, they didn't have a single sack on the stat sheet, but can you think of a moment where that defensive line had a stretch in that game or moments in that game where they really actually disrupted it? I can't think of it at all. And right now, this team is currently last in the league in pass rush win rate. That ain't good. And then they're also 25th in run stop win rate. And obviously their run defense is something I've been concerned about dating really back before the preseason even started, primarily because I looked at their defensive tackle position, one, and said, well, outside of Buckner and Stewart, Lord forbid you sub someone in who's going to come in and stop the run for you. And then, of course, the linebacker position, yes, you had Zaire, but ultimately there was no run stuffers, right? So this is a problem for the Indianapolis Colts right now, one that hasn't reared its ugly head quite yet. And coming into the year, again, I know there's been no Latu against the Broncos, but they were relying on Latu in a big way. Keep in mind that the first-round pick last year is a pass rusher, the famous clip of Chris Ballard chuckling his way to the bank, saying we just got the best pass rusher in the draft. Well, not for anything. No disrespect to Latu, but Jared Verse was far and away a better pass rusher than he was last year. And Latu in one game this year didn't get a sack either, right? So that is what it is. Now, if this Colts defense is going to sustain the level of success they've had to start the year, and realistically, you really have one great game against the Dolphins team, who we don't know exactly who they are, and then one game against the Broncos where I think they were opportunistic in the second half, but it was kind of a mixed bag of goods. If they're going to take the next step as a defense and sustain a level of success this season, Latu does have to step up as a pass rusher for this team, because you look at Kwity Paye, Samson Ebukam, Tyquan Lewis, these are all good players, but ultimately are all average to maybe above average at best on any given day as pass rushers. It's ultimately Latu who's expected to lift this unit as a pass rushing unit. But even if he came into his own and got 12 sacks this year, would that be enough? Maybe. But you look at JT Tuamalu, and he's inactive on game days. If you were to bring him in and I don't know, demote a Tyquan Lewis or something like that, would he help in the immediate? I'm not so sure about that, which does leave you in an interesting spot if you're the Indianapolis Colts. And basically, what you have to ask yourself is this something that you feel the need to address before the trade deadline? I think if you're the Colts and you're playing like this, yeah, and you're thinking ultimately about making a run at this thing, which is what you have to do, right? If you're winning games, I don't care who your quarterback is. And by the way, I think Daniel Jones is, I don't think he's going to stop, quite frankly, but that's neither here nor there. If you're thinking about making a run, I think you got to consider making a move for a pass rusher before the deadline. You think about all the great quarterbacks in this league, particularly the guys in the AFC that you're going to have to deal with. Of course, the Josh Allens, the Justin Herberts, the Patrick Mahomes, the Lamar Jacksons, right? We could keep going on and on. You need to get those guys off their spot. Like, you can't just let them sit back there and throw the damn football. Even if the secondary is going to hold up with a Mooney Ward healthy, let's say, they can't cover guys forever. And when I think about things that the Colts can do from a trade perspective, I do look at one team as a prime trade candidate. And we already have one player from them doing big things for us. And I'm talking about the New York Giants. This is a team right now that has three prolific pass rushers in Brian Burns, Kayvon Thibodeau, and Abdul Carter, who they just drafted with, what was it, the second overall pick this year, whatever it was. They ultimately are not going to be able to keep all of those guys forever. And you do wonder if, well, they are the Giants, right, this year, and they're a team that isn't looking at a playoff run, if they'd be willing to move one of these guys, particularly a Kayvon Thibodeau, who I do already am starting to see get thrown around in trade discussions. This is a guy who right now, or rather next year, is going to be on his fifth-year option with which the Giants did pick up, and then he's going to be a free agent in 2027. And then you look at the Colts and kind of what it would take for them to trade for him. We don't know what it would take from a picks perspective, and of course it would cost picks. But you look at their roster and say, well, okay, two of your pass rushers in Kwity Paye and Samson Ebukam, both of those guys are off the books at the end of the year. And presumably, if they keep playing like this, you're not going to want to re-sign any of them to big money. So it just seems like making an aggressive move, an aggressive push for Kayvon Thibodeau not only helps you make a run this year, but it also gives you one less thing to worry about this offseason going into next year. Now, I'm not sure personality-wise if he's the type of guy that the Colts are into, but from a talent perspective, it would obviously be a huge lift for this defensive line. And the idea of Latu, Hem, and JTT as your core into the future, I think that's something that Colts fans could get excited about. Now, finally, let's talk about Zaire Franklin and him on 5:20 in the morning, now 2 weeks in a row. And both weeks, he made noise, right? The first week, you had him talking about Kylan Granson, which, okay, not a big deal in terms of Kylan Granson. Listen, if the Colts play the Eagles at any point this year, and I don't think they do in the regular season, it would have to ultimately be in the Super Bowl. It's not going to be Kylan Granson that makes the Colts pay, right? So that's one thing, even though I think he was punching down a little bit on that one. But this week, he said Herbert wasn't top 5 on the show. Now, albeit he was specifically asked whether or not he thought that. But, I mean, goodness gracious. Like, are we tired of these types of sound clips from Zaire Franklin or what? The problem, obviously, is the fact that not only did he say that, but it's the fact that the Colts play the Chargers in week 7. And you look at that Chargers offense and all the weapons that they have, right? And obviously Harbaugh, a great coach in of his own. But Keenan Allen, Lab McConkey, Quentin Johnson apparently knows how to play now. And, you look and you just say, do you really want to give that offense bulletin board material right now, especially after everything that went down last year with the trenches? Now, if I'm to be fair to Zaire Franklin, he wasn't flat out derogatory towards Justin Herbert, right? He wasn't like insulting him like he did the Giants last year, where he's like, I want to verse one of them trash offenses. He simply said, no, he ain't top 5. He's probably top 10. I'd rather play with a guy like Baker Mayfield. But nonetheless, it's just the type of soundbite where it's like, you wonder why the heck Zaire even gets involved. And I do understand that you kind of need guys like Zaire Franklin on the team who are going to chirp a little bit, kind of the team's hype man, right? He's going to keep the energy up. He's one of these guys. But also, does it need to be at the expense of other teams and their players, particularly publicly, right? Like, it's one thing if you're going to talk some shit within the locker room, and before the game, you're saying these boys ain't shit, and that quarterback can't play, and all this stuff, right? If you're going to say that amongst yourselves, say whatever it is that you want, as long as you're prepared. But publicly, do we need something that ultimately, because you know how it is, the Chargers, of course, have seen that, and now everyone on that team, including Justin Herbert, is circling that Week 7 game against the Indianapolis Colts. And I just don't think it's necessary for the Colts, and particularly Zaire Franklin, to put them in this type of position. Ultimately, if the Colts win and if they continue to play well, all will be forgiven. But in my opinion, I don't know. Like, I would just prefer Zaire Franklin. Here's the thing with Zaire, is I think he's entertaining. I think he's a fun listener. I think he's a funny guy. I like his sense of humor. I like it all. Like, I like hearing Zaire Franklin speak. But I would prefer, like, if they're saying is Justin Herbert top 5, if Zaire Franklin would just come out and say something like, man, I don't know. Like, I'm focused on the next 5 quarterbacks we play before we play the Chargers or whatever it is. Like, can you be politically correct in the realm of the public sphere, particularly, again, with what went on last year? I don't know. Perhaps that is not how Zaire is wired, and I'm not saying he doesn't have the right to speak, and I'm not saying he's not right? Like, do I think Herbert's top 5? I think he's right on the border of it. But, like, it's really not the point. The point is, like, dude, do you have to put a target on our back? It's like, I don't know. Like, does someone have to take him to the side and talk to him, or, like, they're okay with this? I don't really know. But for me, man, again, I just wish he wouldn't get involved. And I'd assume that you feel the exact same way, right? But that's an episode. I'll see you probably tomorrow or Saturday. Don't exactly know. But I'll see you, of course, before the game. There's only so many days left. We'll talk about that Tennessee Titans game. We'll talk about why it is that the Colts are going to go 3-0. We'll talk about the idea of it being a trap game, which on paper makes sense, but I think it's nonsense for a couple of reasons. We'll talk about that when the time comes. But until next time, my name is Justin. This right here is the Ride the Bench Colts podcast. And as always, go Colts.